Three, two, one. You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, marketing, growth strategy, staff, clients, babies, and marriage. I'm Christina. This is Peter. We're founders and leaders of CIPR Communications. And we are round 2 on support for tourism tactics.
Yeah, so today we're talking about engagement tactics. So the fun stuff, the stuff that I think everybody wants to get to as quickly as possible. But obviously there's the many steps that we outlined before you're ready to get to this point. Yeah, so that's where we're at. Finally, the fun part. So yeah. What is some of your, why don't you set this one up for us, Christina?
I think this one's interesting because this is where like the crux of your education is important, because I mean, you can't empower someone to do something if they don't know why it matters to do it. And I guess maybe some would follow blindly, but it's much easier to engage the public or tell them that something's important when you have already told them that something is important.
Yeah, and this is something that I'll just sort of stop you for a second, but both Christine and I come from a government background, and this is something I think whenever we saw government do a poor job of sort of communicating some kind of change, it was often because they didn't take the step of educating first. And then, it felt like it was almost in solution of a search of a problem, because you didn't actually know what problem they were trying to solve because they didn't do that work ahead of time, right? So this is sort of a similar type thing where you need to first sort of outline the problem or get people educated on the problem, for lack of better terms, before you can start getting them engaged on what the solution is or how to help move the solution forward.
Yeah, and I think about examples of destination development where, the call to action on the government side is often funding. The call to action on the residential or the local side is often support, right? Like, yes, I want this art center. Yes, I want this new trail or this water park or whatever it may be. But again, if people have a foundational knowledge of how these things help, they have a foundational knowledge of like what your tourism organization is, whether it's a DMO or an ECDEV or, just a nonprofit that you've put together with your other tourism operators in the area. All those things are important. I think of one client recently that, they came to us after they had been through a process of, okay, we want to do some destination development. We're now going to present at this regional meeting with all of the local counselors. And everyone kind of looked at them and went, who are you?
Right.
What do you do? You're the what organization?
Right.
Oh, I thought your organization did this. Why are you coming and asking for money for that?
Yeah.
And so, to your point, in the last episode we did on education tactics, it's like this stuff is even laying the groundwork on like who you are.
Yeah.
And what your organization does. Because I think a lot of locals and government officials don't necessarily understand the true mandate of tourism organizations.
Yeah. And there's a lot of organizations out there, right? And there's they may have heard of one and not the other, and there's sub-organizations, and there's committees of, organizations within, let's just call it the city of, the city of whatever might have some kind of tourism committee within it, but it might also have like a DMO or some kind of destination management organization or some kind of, whatever. And they, whether that's appropriate or not, that might just be the case. And so your municipal official might know about one, thinking you're that organized, so to your point, there's a lot of organizations out there, and you got to remember that politicians specifically deal with a lot of different people all the time. And I see this a lot. People go in hot in a politician meeting and they start just going after, this is the issue, this is how to solve the problem. And oftentimes it's like, whoa, like, who are you? What are you talking about? Like, you need to set it up.
Yeah.
You need to educate. Even sometimes if you've done some education, it's like a re-education before the ask, right? And so that there's a lot of, got to be as clear as possible in this step. So that just to avoid any confusion, because if you create confusion at this step, then you're definitely not going to engage or empower your people, because they're just going to be confused. They won't know what to do, right?
Yeah. No, it's true. And I always like think about this stage, obviously after your education stage, as like the follow-up,
Right.
right? So you've had great conversations in educated government, you've had desk side briefings and talk to media, you've sent your locals whatever it is from a tactical perspective, hopefully starting to tell the story of tourism in your area. And now it's the follow-up, right? So do you, like the first obvious question is like, do you get it?
Yeah.
Right? Because if it's like, if the answer is no, I don't get it, then obviously you're not done educating, right? And those conversations can help suss you out, and then, or suss that out. And then it becomes the, okay, you get it. Tourism is important. So now here are the things you can do.
Right.
And I would say from, we talked about 3 different stakeholder groups. So, government, media, and residents. And I think, the overarching group being obviously your members or your tourism operator community that should always be kept in the loop and be given the resources to also empower people around this topic. But, from a government perspective, now the follow-up and the empowerment goes to, okay, I have this ask.
Right.
And this ask is either around, like, it's directly related back to your goals. So is it around funding and destination development? Okay, there's your ask and you start that process. Is it around partnership and what that looks like and becoming better partners in your community? Is it around, I feel like blowing the horn of tourism even louder? So several of our clients have gone down this path and actually had their city or community or town councils then declare a week, a day, a month, or a year tourism
Right.
centric. So, Kamloops had 2019 as this annual Together in Tourism,
Right.
and the city was committed to that. Or we've had communities in other regions throughout Western Canada do a week of tourism focus or support tourism week. So this proclamation and this real kind of tangible place to point that the city supports this, or your elected officials support this, which again helps you with media coverage and relationship building and all these other things too.
Yeah. It also helps with getting, politicians or whatever on the record with respect to support for tourism, which is important, right? Because it's gives you then something to go back to in terms of a decision made in, council or whatever it might be that may go against sort of the spirit of what they, publicly endorsed. And, it's a bit of a, hey, remember when you endorsed this as important and now you've made this decision and it seems inconsistent. So it gives you a bit of a base from which to then have further conversations and to sort of push back a little bit if things don't go as planned. And it's really important, right? Getting those politicians, getting people on the record in terms of supporting things, create some level of accountability for moving things forward. Which is really, to me as an advocate, a government relations type person, is probably one of the most important things you can do, because people remember when they make commitments to things, especially when they're public and they have to sort of follow through on those things. So yeah, really important.
It's true, and I feel like all of your residential tactics at this stage are about, I don't want to use the word pressure because it's not about pressure, but it's about kind of further illustrating the point of tourism's importance to your elected officials, right? Like this is building support for tourism at its core is a very political thing.
Right.
And so, tactics that we've done here are a postcard campaign. So locals can be given a postcard that is either, we've seen it done 2 ways. There's like a central address, so the tourism destination itself, their visitor center, you send or bring the postcard there, and that is dropped off. We've had destinations with like the garbage bags full of postcards come in and present them to council. here's thousands of postcards with your community members that support. Or there's the address of, you know, the city hall or the mayor's office, and they go directly there.
You could do like sign a petition type of thing. Is
I like the former from a postcard perspective, just
Yeah.
because now you know numbers,
Right.
you have a line of sight on that tactic and just see if it's working. I think that then, you know, you're able to control that message. Whereas if you're just having people send them in, I mean, hopefully the mayor wouldn't be throwing things in the garbage, but you don't know like where that's ending up necessarily. So those have like those things that are about getting some attention and getting noticed that way. I think there's other interesting things like social media campaigns that we've done, all very public facing, social media badges. I support tourism.
Stickers that you can put on local businesses. I support tourism type stickers. So there's lots of ways. I think this is a really like the more public, this is about the public displays of support for the industry and or for the initiative that you're pushing forward, and really getting people to publicly sort of raise their hand. I guess if you're going to summarize what these tactics are supposed to be trying to do, I would just say it's getting people to raise their hand, be public, make their vote count, make their vote known, if you will, for lack of better terms. And then obviously on the politician side, it's a little bit about creating some accountability in terms of public positions and public support and declarations and things like that. And then obviously on the media side, it's just getting all these things covered and getting some press around it all, so that there's a ongoing conversation for these things, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, and what I will say, and we talked about this before in terms of understanding your timelines, but an empowerment campaign looks very different in an election year versus a non-election year,
Yes.
right? So in a non-election year, I think it looks very similar to what we were just talking about, right? Like, you know your council is going to be there for a few more years. You have issues that need to be addressed in the next few years. And, you know, the election year, so in Calgary where we are, it's an election year this year. And so the education piece goes potentially longer and is multi-phased, because you're potentially having to educate new councillors as they get elected, or reaffirm what people know who've gotten reelected. But I think there's this interesting empowerment stage that happens during an election for people to think about. And we've done this with several clients before, where you force those running for election to make some public stance, right? So, you know, surveys, right? Sending all of the councillors surveys and publicly posting results. And a lot of the surveys we do are very simple. I mean, you and I have sat on the other side and been communications consultants filling out surveys from special interest groups. But I think of one we did recently for a destination marketing organization, and it was 2 questions. One was around, do you understand the organization, and what do you think we do?
Right.
Which from
it's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah, and so that really lines you up for really strong education before, and potentially helps you understand if this individual is going to be supportive right off the bat or not. And then the second, usually around a specific issue, right? So what do you think about destination development? I feel like this time around a lot is going to be about funding for tourism recovery and those things, but having those 2 questions and then being able to send them to boards, to stakeholders. And no, I don't think you should pick a winner.
Yeah, no.
Being able to put it out there and say, here were their responses. Here's what everyone said. Here's the nice little chart based on what we think. Here are the people that are supportive of active tourism growth in the area. Here you go. Are very interesting. So I think it's kind of an empowerment tactic, but in an election year, it allows you to continue to run that empowerment campaign. And especially if you're telling locals and you're empowering them to support tourism, now all of a sudden as an organization, you've also shown them which candidates are potentially supportive of tourism. It's a great value add.
And similarly, in an election year, other stakeholders in the tourism industry, if they're engaged and wanting to, you know, it's like, here's a list of questions you can ask people when they're canvassing your door. Here's a list of questions you can ask people related to supporting tourism from your organization, right? So So, it's not only you asking those questions, you can empower others to ask those questions in an election year and outside of an election year, obviously. But, if it's actually something that comes up, I mean, think about a politician. Politicians really are just reactors, and they react to what comes up. And so the more it can come up from multiple different organizations, the more successful you're going to be at making that an issue that they should, they will believe that they think is important, they should care about.
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, these tactics are all about making people do something, whether it's attend something or send something or post something. I feel like these are the easier tactics, but the better the job you've done on education, the easier it will be to have people engage in these.
Right. Nice.
All right, that's education, or no, that's empowerment. That's education about empowerment.
There you go.
All right, you know where to find us. iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker. Watch for the next episode dropping in a couple days.
Bye.
3, 2, 1.